Hello, I'm Jamie.
Hello, I'm Mark, and it's time for another episode of Through the Garden Gate. Day night. I'm running late. It's time for another episode of Through the Garden Gate. Let's see if Jamie is in. Hello, hello. Jamie coming in. Here he is.
I'm in, you're not. What are you doing?
I got distracted in the veg garden and then realised what the time was. And I was like, I need my tripod.
No, I've done it before, just holding it for an hour and a half.
Well, you're hardcore.
Oh, stupid.
You still down the pub?
No, I'm at home now. Look, home in the allotment.
Nice.
Just spitting. And, hold on. Just look. And look what I brought out with me, just in case. Look at that.
Matching hat.
But it's not raining. It's a couple little spits. But I'm saving it just in case.
I think we've had our rain. I think it's done for the day,
Yeah.
hopefully. Very, very wet today.
Evening, Mario. Hey, Becky. Oh, my God. The rain's just been ridiculous this last week. Oh, just so over it. It's just... Oh.
It's never just a little bit, is it? It's always got to just go too far.
Oh, it's just ridiculous.
It's not helping with the slug problem, is it?
Touch wood. I'm touching lots of wood. And I think mine have all, I don't know what they've done. Got off.
What,
Maybe.
Slugs?
Yeah.
God. You should have seen them at work today. Me and Chris found like a massive pile of them. All just like mingled together in the middle of the courtyard.
That's good though, isn't it? Scoop them up.
Feed them to the chickens.
Did you give them to the chickens?
No. I ain't got any chickens.
What did you do to them then? Hey, Joe.
Just left them.
What the hell? You're sitting there moaning about your slugs and you're leaving them.
Ugh, my smells are mating.
Just scoop them up, put them in a plant pot and then chuck them out the window as you're driving home.
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Millpool by the Sea, good evening. She was discovered through the garden gate because of the reel that I did this week.
Oh, fantastic. Hello, Chris. We'll give you a shout in a second. Chill out. Look what else I got. Hold on. You're going to be impressed. What am I now going to show you?
Cheers.
And it's got coffee in as well. Evening, Kim.
Nice.
No slugs. I'm eating. All right, we won't talk about slugs. Blech.
You're eating slugs?
Well, snails. I've had snails before.
Yeah. Can't we sell the idea of eating slugs to somebody?
What are they any different?
Well, you don't have to take the shell off.
Apparently, they have an internal shell. I heard on a podcast this week.
What?
Yeah. They have an internal shell. I have one dog with me at the moment because they're split up. They're not allowed to be near each other for a week or so because Bramble's coming the season and her son is getting a bit frisky.
Oh, that's incest.
So we're keeping them split up, so they're not allowed to be on their own for any length of time.
No. Someone I know uses slugs for hand washing.
Well, you can't say that and then say don't ask. We need to ask. Explain, please.
How do you wash your hands with slugs? Like they're extra slimy.
The slime is absolutely great. I bet it's good for your hands. I bet it makes it a good hand cream. Bet it does. Oh, the rain's been horrendous. When was it? Sunday, rain, hail. We had about an inch of hail on the floor.
Did you?
Yeah.
We ain't had anything like
Oh my
that.
God!
It's been on and off, but it's not
No,
been
Sunday at
continued.
about 5, pubs 5. Absolutely horrendous. Never known nothing like it in my life.
Unreal.
Oh no, leopard slugs are supposed to be the good ones, aren't they? They eat the little ones. They eat the little bad ones.
Yeah, supposedly.
There you go. The slug slime is great. I don't even know what that word says. I'll say soap.
Sufficient.
Sufficient.
Sufficient. Soapiness.
Good for cleaning.
Doesn't seem to come off though. You have to really, if you've got a good dollop of it, you have to really scrub
Yeah.
it to get slug slime.
Big old bit
It's grim.
of fairy liquid.
Yeah.
Have you been doing anything special in the garden this week?
Not too much. Reprogramming areas of the lawn for the lawnmower
Yeah.
so that it works better, which seems to be working so far.
Because it was crashing too much.
Well, it was the area that's got a mound on it, and it was all included in one area before. And the area that it was included in, I wanted to do crisscross.
Oh yeah.
And if it tried to do the mound with crisscross, it ended up getting stuck. So I've taken that area off as its own area and got it to just do any random pattern that it needs to, so that it can go over the hills and stuff,
Oh, right, okay.
whichever way it needs to, rather than having to go in a straight line, because then it just ends up stuck in the grooves. It seems to have worked.
I suppose it'll take a time for you to sort it out and see what it can and can't do.
Slowly programming areas where you've got problems, and then I've just redone areas. And there was a big area that was all one, and the bottom half of it cut right, but the top half needed to be lower, but you couldn't change the mowing heights because it was one area. So I've separated that into another area as well.
Does it change heights, does it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you can do it. I think it goes from like 10 down to 1, whatever that means. But yeah, it's probably centimetres or something. But,
yeah, I didn't realise you could do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an impressive bit of kit.
It is, yeah. So when it comes to autumn and winter, when grass is slowing down, can you slow it down?
Yeah, it'll slow down and not do. Well, it does it by sensor anyway, so it only cuts if it needs doing.
Does it?
So if it comes to an area and it isn't long enough, it'll just go somewhere else.
Oh wow!
So when it comes to autumn, it'll just it'll be in its charging dock more often, because it'll be like there's nothing. So
they'll just be driving around all the areas and go no.
Yeah. And then I guess when it comes to proper winter and it's stopped, you just take it inside rather than leave it.
Yeah.
And then pack it away.
Oh, it's a good bit of kit. I need to come over and have a proper look at it and have a look at your workspace.
It is amazing. I mean, we added another area last week because it was, now I've got it doing patterns everywhere other than 2 areas. It was being parked in its charging station, saying that it finished all the areas for like a day or so. So that told me that it had capacity to add another area. And I added that area, and the difference it makes, it just looks so much better.
Yeah.
It really does.
Oh.
And it's just another area that you ain't got to go and mow. And the more areas I can knock off my list of mowing, the more time I can spend going to garden centres.
Hey Jenny, can you program it to bring you coffee?
Well, depends how bumpy it is, because if you put it on its back and it fell over, then
I bet your
coffee's.
You could fashion some kind of drinks holder for it, couldn't you?
You'd need it with one of those gimbal things.
Yeah.
So it holds a cup.
Hey Fernando. Yeah. I'll definitely have to come over and have a day with you and Chris at some point.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, it'd be really good.
Safe work.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Got any electrics that need doing?
No, I'm going to come and do gardening. I don't want to do electrics. I want to do less and less, not bloody more and more.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So we can find you plenty of gardening to do.
Oh, yeah, love all that. You know that. I bet someone's itching to come in.
Yeah. So, tonight's guest is back by popular demand. His voice has regularly been compared to that bloke off of Ground Force. He's a plant grow champion, a rose aficionado, a green finger charity ambassador, a Guernsey addict, Garden Media Guild committee member, an autism advocate, a Garden Gate smasher,
Yes.
one of the nicest men in horticulture. It's my assistant gardener. It's Chris at Groovy Gardening UK. Oh, he's
Is
gone.
he not in?
There he is.
Oh,
Well, I am here. I'm just looking for my face. Where the heck is my face? There we are.
Oh,
Good evening.
oh, your camera's a bit dirty.
There we are.
There we go.
Very
there he is.
kind of you to say. Very kind.
So
Nice to see you.
who is the person off Ground Force?
Alan,
Tommy Walsh. Tommy
Yeah.
Walsh.
I have. This is nobody else's comment. Sorry, it's not my comments. It's what followers have suggested to me that when I'm narrating the garden or narrating where I'm going, that there are similarities and people have followed the kind of calming ways. And I've even had comments, often from the same sex, actually. There's a surprise.
Charlie Dimmock. Sorry, Kim should say Charlie Dimmock.
So there we go. It's just changed. But I mean, I don't follow with it necessarily. But yeah, good evening anyway. But I will tend to sort of go around the garden and go, just check in for your senses as you look across the spirit of the morning sunlight. And for a minute. And it just feels like, I mean, I've just sort of put that on, but I suppose that's the way that the Groovy Gardening account for some has taken, really. Good evening to you both.
I can understand. And I understand what people are saying. I really can. But he's a bit more northern than you,
Yes.
Mr. Titchmarsh.
Yeah, he's a lot more northern. So he's from Ilkley, whereas I'm Lincolnshire born and bred originally. And it would be nice. It's lovely to be back on actually as a returning guest because we sort of started of a little bit. We had a good chat between us chaps last time. It would be good to have a kind of bit more of my roots, I suppose.
Yeah.
I was born in Lincolnshire, but I was born in Grantham, and then lived for 25 years in a village. Yeah, so it was a hobbit in a garden. It was meant to be. Lived in a village north of Grantham for 25 years. Then I've always been an East Midlander, so then went into the job that I used to do. Lived in Newark in Notts for a bit, so inherited a little bit of Nottinghamshire twang, i.e. eliminating the T's from Nottingham. And then moved over to Derbyshire for a bit on the edge of the Peak District, and then came back to where I am now, which is just outside Clumber Park in North Nottinghamshire. So we get on the border with South Yorkshire, so we get a little bit of a South Yorkshire twang from there. Also perpetuated by 4 years living in Sheffield as a student back in the day. But by and large, I mean, my other half feels that I've got quite a posh voice, but Lincolnshire doesn't really have a profound accent in many ways. It's certain words, I would say, are really strong, and I've never inherited that, although I appreciate them enormously.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've got good friends of mine live in Lincoln, and I can hear their Lincolnshire twang quite a bit. And I do hear it come out in you occasionally. Not as much as them. I would say they're broad.
But if I was to say the word brown properly, and I was from Grantham, I'd go brown. For example. But certain things crop up, yeah, for sure. I'm in the greenhouse at the moment, unfortunately, because it is actually thriving down here. However, I will still be able to wander around the garden at some point, if you wish.
What the hell? Joe, Norfolk Blue Dawn said I'm almost Lincolnshire. I'm miles away from Lincolnshire. I'm at least... Oh, where's Lincolnshire change? Sutton Bridge, I think. Must be.
Yeah, you're not far.
Sutton
Not
Bridge.
too far.
About 15, 20 miles from Lincolnshire. I'm closer to Cambridgeshire. Wisbech is closer than Sutton Bridge, so
I can see South Yorkshire from my bedroom window, so I get that kind of thank you twang. And people say, you know, in terms of something I got used to immediately moving up, because I moved up to this area in when this near enough before this house was built, the preceding few months. And people, when they say when their working hours are, they go 9 while 5. They don't say 9 till 5 up here, or 9 until 5 or whatever.
yeah.
They go 9 while 5. I mean, it's not something I thankfully inherited, but yeah,
So-
pleased about that.
Sissy has just said, "Is that an allium or an onion?" It's actually a leek. I've got.
Yeah,
Well, so they are alliums, but yeah, they're all my.
Your leaks are remaining very robust there,
No, they're
Jamie, because
really,
we've seen a few of them
strong.
flop over at work, for example.
They're solid, absolutely solid. They're just, you know, they're like wood, really, really solid.
That's
But
good.
they're nearly all out.
The pollinators.
Yeah, fantastic. And they take. Did I tell you last week? I think I tasted some of the flowers. They're so oniony. It's unbelievable. I keep picking them as I'm walking around the garden.
Your breath of stink.
Wow, makes a change. I think, Chris, last time you were on, I think you were working at Easter.
That's right. So we spoke, I think, mid to late winter on the podcast, and it's lovely to be back as your first returning guest.
Yes.
Fine honour it. And I think we chatted for a long time, and then we couldn't get to even scratching the surface of some of the kind of the story, the background of where I got to, because we had a really enjoyable chat together. Yes, talking a lot about plants. I seem to remember talking about lots of different tangents. We were reviewing books at some point and going off into rude plant names and also and going off into tangents about gardens. But no, I was, when I first spoke to you both, of course I knew Mark, I knew you as well, but I knew Mark in that not as my boss at that point.
Yeah.
I was working balanced as a blended approach, working at both as a trainee at Eastonmore Gardens, which is just south of Grantham, a garden I kind of grew up knowing and visiting as an adult, and balancing that part-time running at the time, East Midlands gardening service. So that was up near me, but based all around the East Midlands. So but we talked a bit about that job at that time. I supported adults with the same condition as myself. For those of you who are watching or watch later, it was described by Mark as an autism advocate because, frankly, I have the diagnosis myself, and it's been the 25th year of officially having that diagnosis this year. And as a kind of nourishing way into running a gardening service, I went in with a plumb into that, which was supporting a lot of adults, younger than me, sometimes older than me, who various different support needs, to either through horticultural therapy to get people engaged in gardening, or potentially if they were just that bit close to getting out into the big bad world that we all live in mutually here, we were the kind of final facilitator to do that. And that involved working in gardens in private, I say private homes, respite homes, day services, schools, you name it. Really good opportunity. And I worked there for, well, perhaps that's what I wanted to, I suppose, but I made the call that it needed more than me to do that. So that's the difference, that you know, even the most passionate individual, and probably and I still believe it was a very good fit for me. But actually, for once, by this point, the gardening account has been going now for 3 years, the Groovy Gardening account, and the kind of personal development has progressed at such a way and with such a vigour that I, for once, thought, well, actually, I'm confident in doing this. You know, if I'm not getting the resources that I require to implement this role, then actually, well, too be it. You know, I'll warn about it, and if it's not heeded at that point, then we'll go from there. I mean, and we're speaking this evening. I understand that role has not been replaced yet since I have left. So that speaks volumes.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it immensely, and everything is treated. I'm trying to be as diplomatic as I can, because there was a lot of reward out there. I then moved on into obviously making the rather bullish decision of going, oh gosh, I've resigned and I've got no job and no work. And something I never personally believed comfortable to be. And society suggests to you that you never do that. And I've worked continuously since I was 14. So my previous background was starting at the family business, and then in animal feed. I come from a farming background. I bet you don't understand that would be the case. I don't give the impression I would be, but I do. My family originally was farming, or in some more extended cases, mining, if you go back in the day. And engineering on my father's side, particularly, although my father's never inherited any of that engineered spark. He can't even replace a light bulb without quibbling. And he'd be happy to say that. Thankfully, I'm a little better in that regard. So, going from the family business, then going into something very driven back in the day. I was a chartered town planner for many years, worked my way up in the business in private consultancy, went to university to get the degrees needed for that, and was very, very driven with doing that. And then the horticulture bug started as a hobby, which is where the account sort of came from. But I realised that there was that vigour that I had for the planning. And then when the planning work started to get quite tricky, I burnt out a few years ago, which instigated getting out of the garden. And I thought more recently, when I had this position doing well at, but couldn't resource the way I wanted, I thought, well, no, I've been through numerous hardships in employment before, doing well, but either not being 100% confident or not being listened to. And I thought, I don't want this again. I've got to a position where I think, right, okay, I have a lot of challenges in life, and I feel that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And you've got to take risks and go with your instincts. And so I made that view that I could harness what I'd done very, very well for many years, 13 years of employment, working my way up in planning consultancy, which teaches you all manner of different skill sets. It teaches you to speak and engage with the public. It teaches you to be a lawyer because you're working with legal agreements all the time. You're a sociologist because you're understanding, and a psychologist because you're understanding people's behaviours and mannerisms and language. The English language is very important in that. Creative writing, so publicising what you're doing, which is translated into how I suppose I project the account and can narrate to audiences and write things creatively in publications. So I thought, well, why not? Why not be putting myself out there to be freelance in one way or another? And of course, then by this point, I have through the account, it hasn't just become a hobby; it has become a partial work thing where. I am engaged with working with companies and working to see gardens. And of course, as you know, and Mark's alluded in his description, I travel a lot. I'm an adventurous person. I wouldn't say I run at 100 million miles an hour. I give the impression that I do, but I don't. I do genuinely slow down on vacation. But there's always that yearning. There's always that willingness, and that's it. So, that all seems to lend very well into making the kind of gung-ho decision to go myself. Anyway, I didn't expect immediately when I was going for various gardening positions, but Mark approached me very kindly. So that was, when was that? In April? Was it May? No, it was May I started, April, possibly end of March.
Wasn't it?
You asked. Yeah. And it's not the first time you've muted, albeit you've muted on a couple of times, probably asking for a bit of help there or there. But you went in on the premise of saying, well, look, just to tie you over, there might be the ability to do a couple of days a week. It was becoming well versed for you, Mark, that you were needing a bit more support in the garden. It had gone to just yourself, and you're jumping a bit there.
So you had to. Did you go and ask your boss first, Mark? Obviously.
Well, we were talking about getting in an apprentice of some description to ease the load, because basically what my boss wants is it to be less costly to run that garden, but we can't go from what the garden is now to having two gardeners, because two gardeners isn't enough at the moment. So to go from that to one gardener without making any alterations and expecting me on my own to make those alterations with no help whatsoever, it was just an amazing battle. And, you know, areas of the garden were just going into disrepair. It was demoralising for me because I was looking around going, you know, I can't win.
No.
Every day I've got a list as long as my arm that I could be doing. And in the growing season, all I'm doing is mowing the grass.
Yeah.
So, it was getting to the stage where I was contemplating my own future,
But
to be honest.
yeah, so just the maintenance of it was too much, let alone actually doing anything else.
No, and there was no master plan going forward. You know, there was nothing, and then it was perpetuated by the other because the other gardener went part time because she wanted to do something else other than gardening, and then it was, you know, she was working during the season, and then at the end of the season she said, I'm not coming back next year. And at that point it was like, right, we need to come up with another idea now, because otherwise we're in big trouble. And when Chris did come in, I was in a lot of trouble. You know, it was going backwards rather than not even standing still. It was going backwards big time.
But I saw when I came immediately, and you invited me over and to chat with the owner and yourself. But I saw that initial premise, and of course, having worked, so you know, my past gardening history. Then you mentioned about me working at Easton, so I finished there in February. What I neglected to explain earlier is that I went full time at Autism East Midlands when that ended. So even with I'm talking about this, even with going full time there, the notion of gardening across the region for one person to be able to lead and was led me to question a few things in that respect. And I think Mark's opportunity was timely. I think it was noble. I think it was obviously I much appreciated, much valued. We know each other very well anyway. We've got to know each other well. I think that helps enormously with your ability to kind of know where I come from. We've got some connections. Obviously, I mentioned about my diagnosis. We've got similarities in terms of not personally, but of course with George, of course. So there's a lot that we've had similarities and discussions about that, which helps with kind of harnessing on that. But actually, in terms of our personalities, you know, I come in with that kind of visual flair of choreographing a garden, editing it, and simply just that kind of loyalty I hope, and the ability to hit the ground running and not have to have too much guidance because of the way that the brain processes the information. You know, I'm invariably ignoring the fact that I did potentially nearly go hooping up a ladder for a joke the other day when we did the hula hoop reel. I am largely a good state hand, you know, and unlike and not to begrudge the trainees, you know, I was in that situation at the end of the day, but I've got to a point where I can use my loaf and take care of that, and just help relieve some of that pressure for you, Mark. So, you know, I was going for interviews as sole gardeners at large private estates and stately homes and all sorts. There could have been some really good opportunities, but the question is about the feeling that you get in the garden. And this particular garden, it gave me that. But then on top of that, you've got the added recognition that you know somebody who's going to be your boss, that's got a calming influence that and way about them that will work with me. You know, I can't have somebody who's completely indecisive and won't be able to know what the context of the garden is. You know, Mark's the best possible person because he's been custodian of that garden. I know you were head gardener more recently, but I would still say you were a custodian of that garden for that 12 years. So, you know, I can be guided by you. At my stage in my career, it's quite in its infancy. You know, I mean, 4 years ago, I wasn't a gardener at all. There was no horticultural knowledge. You know, the account was set up as a hobby in lockdown and eventually morphed into, you know, extra training here, doing RHS qualifications partially, volunteering National Trust and Private Gardens, and then training at Easton as a job, and then ultimately the AEN job, and then here. And then on top of that, of course, there's been this wider account that's gone from a few people. And it isn't the largest account, we know that, and I'm not seeking it, but it has a very, very loyal following. To have people waking up in America at 4 o'clock in the morning and actually setting their alarm clock, and it's 4 a.m. their time, not our time, to watch what you're doing routinely, and they tell you that. I think it's a measure of kind of like there's a loyalty there that keeps it going. Really, I enjoy doing it. And why not make a kind of career in a way partially out of it? I do still want the gardening to be the bread and butter, but at the moment it's also running as a freelance. I've got my own website. I'm engaged with the shows. I'm employed by a few companies and so forth as well with collaborations, as you two are. And I like it in that way, but I would never lose sight of the gardening. And to be working with Mark, I think we're getting on well. I started in May, but the thing that we both didn't realise, I alluded that Mark was hoping for a stopgap, I think a couple of days a week, but the owners, I think, walking around, asked the question of what I needed. They knew I'd resign. Well, I presume they knew I'd resigned from my job or I was looking for something. And I just went, well, I need to be full-time in order to make it work. And I think they've been of that view that they do, you've come to the realisation that you do need some help. Your skills, as much as how highly skilled they are, and they are, I don't doubt that for a second, that you just cannot keep up with a garden that's 7 acres plus a 5-acre woodland. I think I've got that the right way around this time. Normally I do it the other way around and do a discredit the garden and say it's 5 acres. But yeah, it's huge, isn't it? So, but he turned around and said, well, we can do full time till end of October. So that's where I am. Music to both of our ears. Keeps me in a sound position. But I love doing this. And we do a lot of work. We do get on a lot. We get on well personally. We do actually do a lot of work. Instagram creates a lot of misapprehensions, things that jolling around in the garden.
There's lots of tomfoolery going on as well, I believe.
It was a surprise to you, Mark, wasn't it? I think the amount that I was going to be here every day. That was true, wasn't it? You weren't expecting that.
No, it was definitely sold, until you came around, it was sold as a couple of days a week help.
Yeah.
But then I think meeting you and realising how passionate you were, and you weren't just another person that was going to turn up for the wage. Yeah. You were actually going to pour some of yourself into the garden, which is what it needs. A garden like that, it's not a job you just turn up for. You've got to put a bit of yourself into it, because otherwise,
and be prepared
it doesn't
to work with scenarios and plants that you might not like or not be used to, and actually have a bit of aptitude to engage with that way of working. I mean, I come to work with you admitting that a lot of my understanding of machinery, for example, and kind of the physical hands-on practices of gardening, I'm slightly sketchy in some of those respects, but I think it's the best possible garden conduct to learn that type of skill from what you deal with. It's just because of the stage in life. If you're employed in a formal garden, a historic garden, and you're sort of trainee, they sort of limit in a way, and also because of the amount of days a week that you were there. Eastern were unable, for example, to be able to offer me all those understanding of skills, because if they were doing work involving strimming, I mean, I can strim, I have to learn to strim, but if, for example, I wasn't doing that and it was on a day I wasn't there, then you've missed the opportunity to strim. But because by being with you full time, and a kind of you've got that overall pressure to do the garden, and it's not going to all be done at once and done immaculately at once either. We're both coming from that standpoint of we're going to make it better. We're going to nurture it and evolve it into the next chapter, but we don't need to be overwhelmed by it. Therefore, we can fit in all of these extra attributes, things that I need from my career development, but also you're gaining from some of the things and insights that I can give you. It might be ways of making gardening more efficient. It might be propagating new plants that you've not tried that I can bring to the table, which we're already experiencing. and getting a second opinion, crucially. You know, if you've done a border, just getting a proper horticulturally and pragmatic eye on things rather than just, yes, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So
Brilliant.
I think it should work well, really.
And
well, you've also worked in estate gardens, which is something I've never done. So you've had to learn how to get things done quickly, and also be in an open garden. Whereas I've only ever, although I've been in horticulture since I was 15, I've never actually worked in an estate setting other than where I am now. So the only experience of that I've got from where I am now. So you bring that to me, you know, it gives you, you know, you have methods of working that are alien to me, because the person that was the head gardener before me, again, was somebody that had never worked in an estate. So we just didn't have that knowledge. And you've worked at National Trust properties, you've worked at historical places, and bringing that to the garden is an asset, even for somebody that's only just got into gardening. But the way you went about it by volunteering your services has set you off really well.
Yeah, and it's always what's been the thread throughout. So yes, an office worker beforehand, you know, and progressing from graduate right through what was, I suppose, one level below director. I was in the previous work line that I was at. I suppose I would have carried on to that if I'd stayed there. And lockdown presented a few challenges to me. Some people got a good benefit out of it. I didn't. I found suffered quite a bit with it. Not with the health side of things, thankfully, in terms of physical health, but mentally I struggled with it because of that lack of routine. You know, that's where the diagnosis issue, I suppose, it reared its head again. And in some respects, you know, and we can touch on that more, is that actually I find the autism diagnosis can rear its head more strongly, really, for me, as in negative when it gets back. It can be harder now than it ever was at school, albeit without the sort of teasing and, you know, struggling in that respect, and obviously then the education side of things of going through school. But what it taught me was that it forces obviously all of us outside, and that thankfully you can only be thankful of that scenario, albeit it felt unpleasant, because it forced me out into here to find this new discovery. And I thought I could never do anything else other than this very narrow but incredibly driven path to go on and do this chartered professional job, which when I was studying was the fourth most employable degree subject in the country, town planning. You know, a safe bet. And I thought I couldn't do anything else, and had this slightly in joke that even to myself that I wasn't adept at understanding anything kind of practical and physical based and outdoors based, because other than appreciating and floating around a National Trust garden that happened to be beautiful, and the fact that it had a cafe at the other end, and regularly visited gardens, there was no horticultural eye. And the fact that something could grasp you and hook you and keep you going in this manner had just as if well has more vigour than the planning did. And I thought, hang on, I've got something here. I've got something here that's triggering the best possible facets of my personality and brain. You know, the intelligence was being tested, but it was being pleasantly tested. It was engaging. It was things were being memorized quickly, which again for the autistic brain is music to the ears. You know, retaining information was suddenly becoming easier, and it wasn't. There was no social stress. I could talk to people. I mean, I presented to audiences brilliantly as a town planner. I used to get up on stage and do presentations used to do seminars and conferences. I did it in other capacities as well. I'll come on to this, but was fine doing that, but I'd sit at the desk and I'd be sat there sweating, and I was, being gross about it. But I was sat there nervous and anxious and underconfident in what I was doing, and always had to ask for a second opinion on it, and was doubtful. But in this arena, I run with it, and I go, yes, I'm not the oracle, and I'm going to get things wrong. But I don't sit there going, oh, I'm no good for this, I'm no good for that. My goodness me. I just love it. And thank goodness you can do it in a blended approach where you can, yes, work in a private garden, which, it is just me and Mark, and we are our own company. And yes, we do get on well, but there's no public interface. I have had that in the past and enjoy it. But the other work that I do, of course, then facilitates that. So it's coming on here talking to you, for example. It's going to help at Chelsea Flower Show. It's speaking, I know Kim's on here tonight, being very kindly asked numerous times by Kim to help her in various ways. And I think the kind of narrating bit of the garden, the presenting bit, as we found, is more my forte in that respect. And I love doing that, and that provides that feed for that kind of advocacy circuit that I've always been quite good at doing. But the difference is with horticulture as a whole and the gardening, it's the doing of the actual product and the work that I have a reasonable amount of confidence on, rather than looking over my shoulder and fretting and feeling like I'm comparing myself to others, which is what I always used to do in my old capacity, even the planning capacity. I'd be always second guessing and worrying and going into appraisals being worried to death and feeling underconfident, and then coming out and getting promoted. It was always the case. I got promoted 3 times in a row within 2 years, and it was always the most unpleasant experience ever, and because I never saw it coming. But this there's no question that there's no going back on this. But I love this ability that Mark's taken me on. And yes, I've gone self-employed because that's the owner's request, actually, which is I'm fine with. But it's actually unlocked. It's quite challenging because it's daunting. You've got to put all your own bills together. But actually, why not be freelance and then supplement it with extra work? It gets your kind of media side to your work and kind of polished PR side to your work. It challenges you to up your game in that respect, and that's been a massive learning curve. And that's exciting.
Very. I don't know, there's something I wanted to ask you a couple of times. We've met several times now, Chris, and get on really well. A while back, we were talking, or you were talking somewhere about the RHS qualifications you partially took, but you've just said a little while back that you completed you went to uni and completed and passed. So how could you cope with that bit, but not the RHS? What was the difference? Why you couldn't cope with the RHS? What?
Good question, Jamie. Actually, it's good for me to touch on this. So I'm the holder of, I've got a BA Honours and a Master's in Urban Studies and Planning from a really good university, University of Sheffield. And, and I needed that to become nowadays, to become a planner, you can go in other ways, apprenticeships and so forth. But at that time, you had to have degrees to get through. And I suppose it comes down to the proportion of exam-based ways of learning, and B, I suppose that kind of mindset that you're not by no means being given a free ride to know what you're writing about, but you've got a little bit more freedom in, I suppose, modules and subjects that are chosen. So in an RHS qualification, you have no luxury of choosing a dissertation subject on something that you are really passionate about and can really run with. Yeah. You don't have the ability to choose modules. Well, you could do, but you wouldn't end up with the full qualification. And the RHS level 2 qualification that I completed, partially completed, I started, so I'll go back a bit. I took the view when this garden started, I built up a little bit of a rapport online, and the account was still quite popular relatively at that time. Always getting rid of a following. I thought I want to have something to show for this, and my natural gravitas was to start volunteering in a garden. Going back in life, I've always bolstered paid work with some form of either a community work, advocacy work, charitable work, you name it. I worked for the Royal Town Planning Institute for 10 years in various voluntary capacities and did it well. So again, harnessing what you've had into a different sector. And I thought in this case, right, well, I want to volunteer in a garden. My natural inclination is go to National Trust Garden. And I naively at the time thought, right, you must have to have qualifications to even get on the roll books, even for volunteering. I was quite naive in my wisdom at that point to believe that. It's nothing further than the truth, in fact. So off I went and did a distance learning RHS level 2. The issues that I encountered with RHS level 2 are quite public, and I was happy to be so. And I suppose what some people follow my account for, as much as some people might follow it for the calming influence of the voice, when is also that there's a lot of honesty and perceived authenticity with it, which is true. I find it hard to be dishonest. It's just the way it is. It's the way that a lot of autistic people find the sense of injustice very difficult to grasp. And that then extends to your own personality, because you can't get away with telling porkies very easily or being insincere. And that can then translate down into the way that your body language looks on screen in this particular case. If I were to be insincere, it would be bleeding obvious, putting it this way. And so people can find a way into following what I do because they get that perception that there is a bit of trust with it, which is very humbling to hear. This is, again, their words, not mine. And I found that I thought, naively that this was the process, but actually that there were very strict modules on the course, the level 2 course, and they were exam based, which historically has never suited me one bit. And I've flown when there's been other ways of learning, coursework based, land based, on site, practical application and stuff, and the as to my knowledge, rather sadly, and this is where I've been public with the RHS SPA in the past, is that their marketing literature for qualifications is that in order to be a well-rounded figure in the horticultural world, or something on the lines of that, quite patronising, I felt, to be a well-rounded figure in the horticultural world, you have to therefore do both the theory and the practical elements of the qualification. Now, I chose on basis partly of that word, the theory at the time, because I thought, well, I've got to know the ins and outs before I apply myself. That was my view. So I went down the theory line and got swarmed by all this exam pressure, which is at no measure of intelligence whatsoever as it came about. And my marks were all over the place. I got commendation in pests and diseases. I could reel off hollyhock rust till the cows come home. But the next one would be abject failure and not knowing where to go. And then compounding that was the fact that examiners' comments are very, very, very scant, other than general comments on where people did right and where people did wrong. And you have to wait an immense amount of time for them to be publicised. And then on top of that, you have the fact that, unfortunate timing, when I applied to be an RHS level 2 candidate, they changed the syllabus about 4 or 5 weeks in. So there was a time pressure for those candidates on the old syllabus to finish up. Otherwise, they would lose the ability to complete their exams. So they had to get them done in a certain amount of time. And I was one of those unlucky people. So it was a bit of a storm in a teacup. And quickly realised, I persevered. I'm a believer of carrying through as far as I could, but I took the view that after passing half of my modules and needing to do some more, and I was paying for these each and every time, that I was on a better path. And of course, by that point, I'd got the trainee position confirmed at Easter. And again, another risk-taking decision, but instinct-driven one. I thought, right, well, I've kind of gone past this point now. I'll know better next time. I should do the practical exam first. It's probably what was better suited. If somebody wants to ask me to do a qualification again, I will do that, but it will be the practical based exam. But for now, let's run with the general indication of aptitude, which is the fact that a prestigious garden has taken me on as their trainee. You couldn't have better understanding than that, and be guided by them. Yeah, I'm going to learn so much more from their wisdom than any hour pressure-driven moments in the exam with what was often very scientifically worded questions that swayed you off on a tangent. Lots of words there from me, but I felt they were necessary.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I remember you saying a while back, but thank you for just telling me actually, all about it. I keep thinking about doing an RHS course of some description, but Suki's just saying there about being dyslexic and the Latin names. And now I haven't had a diagnosis, but I'm 99% sure I'm dyslexic. I struggle reading. I have to read the same page over and over and over again. So, but the Latin names, you, Chris, just blow me away. Absolutely blow me away when you can just go bang, 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 bang. And we've been gardening very similar amount of time. I was locked down as well. I haven't had as much experience going and working in the big gardens like you have, but just for you to be able to bang them off like you do is unbelievable.
I go live. So for anybody who's not aware of who I am and the thing, one of my things is I go live often on Sunday mornings. It's called It's Sunday, I'm in Love with Gardening. And yes, walking around the garden. It used to be other days of the week. Obviously, I've been through that many jobs in recent times that the day of the week changes in which I do the live slot. But but that's the narration. Because I'm a very visually driven person, I have a photographic memory. That's a big blessing, I accept, and not everyone has that. And won't be. It's an enormous asset to be able to do that. Because I have that enables the ability to have sort of visual triggers as I go around the garden. Put me though in that exam question situation, which was again asking for Latin names. And it could have, in some cases, I remember one example asking for 10 Latin names of evergreen trees, for example. And I just went dead. I cannot go into that. And I suppose a lot of us would. But verbally, off the back of a visual indication of something, yes, great. And I mean, in the previous planning job, I used to get known for remembering reference numbers of planning applications from years gone by, because that same visualization of somebody might have gone, what's the planning reference for that old distribution centre that we knocked down and put housing on? Because I'm getting that visualization for that site, and I knew spatially being a geography word, of where it was in the country and what it involved and kind of why involved. It triggers certain things in the brain, the mathematics of my brain. I've said the word mathematics deliberately if Kim is still on, because I think she knows that. I was actually terrible at maths. I failed my maths GCSE, failed the mock one, which dispels this theory that a lot of autistic people are somehow mathematical savants. It couldn't be further from the truth. My drive was in visual things, which is an English language as well, and geography and sense of environments and places and memory of long-term memory of things. But coordination, no, terrible, much improved through life engineering. And terrible at that kind of basic pure maths. Apart from mental arithmetic, I'm very good at that. But I think the horticulture as a sort of form of artistry works well for that, for that person. But then the critical thing, of course, is go to the next person. If there was another autistic person sat that I pulled in off the street, as you do, next to me now in the greenhouse, it would be different, and each one would be, and each one would. I mean, you could have holograms of me, and they'd all be different if you'd engineered them to be different autistic people, and that's the number, really. So you will have a strength in your own way that I won't even be able to even touch, get even nearer to harness.
Yeah.
highly. Oh well, don't doubt that for a minute.
Definitely. And we both worked on Kim's Garden, didn't we? Well, you've done 2 now, as she said back there earlier, but we both worked on Kim's Garden this year.
I met you the first time on the first one. Or,
No. Oh, yes, you did. That was the first time. Yeah, I came over and we were chatting. Yeah, but only about the garden. I think then. Oh yeah, next time was at the oh my God, Alan Gray's garden, East Ruston Vicarage. Yeah, my favourite garden. I couldn't remember the name, but they are.
Splurged on, became instant galantophiles.
Oh dear, what a day! That was absolutely amazing day.
And I got about 20 because I was.
Oh my God! I hope that comes back up this year.
Very special snowdrop, and I was the cheapskate end. Yeah.
Fingers crossed it comes back this year. Has it stopped raining, Chris? Has it stopped raining?
Yes, thankfully. You want me to go out in the garden?
Could we have a wander around? Let's
have a little wander around and we can talk through together. How about that? I'll take the phone off the tripod then and we'll go out. It's the garden. Yeah, it's a 2-layer. Here we are. There's my greenhouse. So this is Olive greenhouse. And we thankfully there's the cold frame, which is a sort of tall, stuffy one. Look, it's painted blue like Mark's famous palette. That kind of cobalt blue. And in there, I've got the last lot hardened off plant.
Joe's just said Mark would love Alan's T-Rex. He would love the Desert Wash. We will have to get all together and go back up there in this summer before it gets too late and have a proper day out there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
It was a fabulous garden, and I'd never been, so it was a good opportunity to go back in January.
That was February. Was it January or February?
Can't remember.
Yeah,
it might have ended February, end of January or something like that. But here's the garden at the moment. So we're on 2 layers. It's full volume, this garden. There's a bit of lawn left, but everything's been. And to say that this garden, this was this is a new build. Well, it was a new build at the time. This garden didn't exist at all before August 2019. It was a blank canvas.
And was it just had it been turfed, or was it still just bare soil?
We had it turfed, and we did have you won't see so easily from the plant, but we had railway sleeper terracing put in, which was just a chance occasion that we went when the house was built. The house builder kindly invited us round to have a look, and we asked. It was just bare soil at that time, going up to the big oak tree that you can see behind me, and we said, "What are you going to do with the slope?" And they said, "Oh, I'll tell you what, we'll take you around to this bungalow that we've done because we've completed some terraces to see if that would be a good idea for here." So we went round and had a look, and yes, they'd put these railway sleeper terraces. So if I walk around as I'm talking about that, and get a bit closer to show what I mean by that. I mean, those of you who chapter and verse look at the garden will know this. But you've got these steps in the middle, and then there's a great sort of railway sleeper terrace that runs all the way along the edge of the border, and it then sets this garden onto 2 levels. And yes, then it was just turf, and there was nothing else. There was French drain put underneath the lower one, but everything else was there. But if we'd have not had that occasion where we met the house builder, I doubt whether they'd put that in, and we'd have ended up with an ungainly slope with patchy soil, patchy turf that didn't grow under the tree and various other things. Yes. And it does help that garden, the way that it looks at the moment, the way that the planting is done and how we've coordinated it, really helps the kind of cohesion with the colour combinations. And it's been a big. I can't say enough how important things like levels and creating some undulations in your garden does to that wider design, but also helps with things like drought tolerance and adaptation between plants that like their feet wet and versus having those that don't, and being able to combine the two in the garden. It has a massive effect.
So I'm pleased, thankful we've had this, and we've had it August 2019, moved into this house, and the account was started in January 2021. So the bit in between was very little gardening. We just plonked some, we did one border, and we put loads of daffodils along the terrace. That's all we did. And then the majority of the garden, as you see now, to be honest, apart from maybe the border with the, the choice here at the end there, that was in from the very beginning when we placed it in there. And there's a big lime green heuchera, that was in there. But there's very little else other than what is a row of daffodils on the terrace that was there predating this gardening account, because that was where the kind of creativity started to take place, really.
So what made it start then, the creativity, but the gardening? What made you like the gardening?
Well,
because
I wasn't furloughed.
There's an
Sorry,
18-month...
got somebody revving a motorbike on the bypass. It happens often around work, so we have nothing to do around here.
So there's an 18-month gap from when you moved in and the garden was terraced until you actually started.
Well, actually started properly.
Yeah.
So we if I go a bit closer, I'll go into where that choice here was, and then I will remain staying where I am for a minute. So this is what I call the sun and the sun and shade border. Really a nice technical term there for all of us. And this was dug out. It's got some metal black edging that we bought from Wicks, and it's not that deep a border really. And we got a job lot of plants from B&Q that just looked nice, and we plonked them in a coordinated way that we felt would be nice. And
that's no different than millions of other people.
That was effectively what we did. Other than, and I remember having family around, to also then put on top of the terrace a line of about 100 daffodils, mixed daffodils. And the reason why those daffodils became important is because they then, of course, bloomed the following early spring, and they provided something that you don't often see in a garden, which is an elevated hedge of bright colour that, when viewed from that back window, the back bifold door is where a lot of the views of the garden are taken. That pop of consistent colour along the sort of mid-centre line of the garden, provides a foil for anything else you then plan behind, and then in front of it you've got the likes of this border that I showed you, and it sort of top dresses the top of it. So by doing this border, yes, we had no understanding of what the plants were at that point, and actually how to grow them. They were plonked in at that point. Didn't know how to propagate, but at least what the garden was doing was visually starting to draw in, from a design point of view, what things were coming out like in flower, and then what that might instigate as to a combination plant, and what was looking good in what season and what wasn't. Yeah. And it all started to forge things together. But in reality, in those lockdowns, as I wasn't furloughed, my partner wasn't furloughed, he was an essential worker, I was not furloughed, thankfully, but I struggled and was working from home. You know, I stayed at home for the following 2 years after lockdown started. We didn't have an office. So we were outside in here and was appreciating the kind of natural world as it was, the calming influence of that, and, you know, seeing it, and started to think very literally, as I do, again with my brain, and a number of other life decisions followed at that point, such as I think I sold my car. I go through cars every 5 minutes. I've probably had about 20 million cars since I've lived in this house. But I sold the one that I had that time, and I can't remember which one it was. And of course, I got some money back from it because I went for an older one in replacement than the one I had. And for some unknown reason, not knowing the COVID pandemic, as it were, to generate at that point, this was spring 2020 when we got told to stay at home, I started drawing out in the garden, just loosely. We had that blank canvas garden. We had that one border I've showed you. We'll call it the choicier border, shall we? Because that's the easiest to see. And I think as well, by the time we made the decision I'm going to tell you about, we had an evergreen oak tree that was put up in the woodland corner that's right at the back there, and that's it. And I started drawing out, and I thought, oh, wouldn't it be lovely to have a greenhouse? I didn't have any horticultural aptitude or 100% willingness to want to sit in a greenhouse and propagate plants all the time. In fact, it was a really vacuous decision. But the pure reason for it was that we were starting to lay out in this. We had this house, had this opportunity. We had patio areas that were uncovered, and I rather literally and logically, like my brain goes sometimes, goes, we're going to run out of room if we don't think of X, Y, Z. You know, such as we had an area for bin stores that we'd already sort of decided we weren't going to put bins in. They always say they're going to put a bin store area, and then it sort of can't fit a dormouse in it. So we thought, well, right, okay, that'd be good to have something like a greenhouse there. Not thinking necessarily it'd be a metal one at that stage, but it was an area for experimenting. And thank goodness we made that decision, because, of course, then the lockdown ensued more severely. And then there became the whole 6 to 8 month wait on garden furniture, greenhouses, ability to get jabs, ability to get bread and toilet roll. And then, so to be honest, it was a vacuous decision in itself initially, in the sense of, wouldn't it be nice to have, I'd got a bit of money back from my old car, and, you know, not throwing away money. I'm not one to do that. But that was a happy accident, that it was kind of like, we'll end up doing something with that bit of patio, and we'll lose the ability to do anything with it. And a greenhouse would help add value to the outdoor space. I suppose it was I wouldn't say entrepreneurial, but a switched on decision in that respect. And thankfully it came in September 2020. Now that was the point at which I burnt out at work. So autumn 2020, after many years succeeding, and in life as well, really suffered. I went off work for 6 weeks, and I couldn't bear to I couldn't even help with the greenhouse. I wasn't very well at all. And thankfully it came the preceding week before that all kicked off quite badly. And I never went back to work full time. I elected to go part time. So that then unlocked all this ability to have thankfully I was in a fortunate position to work my way up at work, and could afford to obviously do that. It wasn't just down to financial affordability though. That was a shock to the system that meant that I thought, right, I'm much more self-aware, and is it the be-all and end-all to be running and scurrying away at doing the planning work, and also all the voluntary work that I did in association with that ceased at that point. So I reined a few things in, but then let things unravel in this during. And of course, that burnout, which was induced a lot by work stress and overpressures and a complacency that we can rely on Chris, he'll be doing a good job, he's brilliant, we can leave him to himself. And of course you couldn't. You had to check in on me from time to time. And that ended up being a mistake, because I discovered these new pursuits in life out here on my part-time days off. And eventually, of course, that then led to thinking, right, well, why don't I look online and get some inspiration from people? Just thinking it would just be well-known people on social media. I was only on Facebook before, really. And then realised there was an altogether huge other world, partially that had been missed in lockdown, the first one, but in the second lockdown I found it and obviously created this.
I quite regularly, if I'm not too hungover, have a look around your garden on a Sunday morning.
It is an early slot. It's because there's quite a lot of competition on Sundays to get in there live.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and I really enjoy it. But it's not a massive garden, but you've got different areas. You've named them differently, and you've got different. You know what I'm trying to say. You know,
yeah.
I'm not very planty. You know that I'm more veggie.
But I can mark those out. I mean, for a new build house, it is a big plot. I mean, it's the largest plot. We're on a cul-de-sac, and it is the largest plot, I think, of all. I mean, there's some larger houses than ours, but the plot is on like a trapezium shape. I very rarely show the front garden, which wraps around as well to the side of the neighbours. And we do have tend to do it more on stories if I share the front garden. But the back garden is the centrepiece of it, and it's we've got a patio that runs the whole length from the greenhouse to the border with our neighbour. Originally, when we moved in, it was the usual derisory square of house builder provided patio. You know, something again that even a cat couldn't fit on. So we extended that after the lockdowns were lifted and people were allowed to sort of go around and so forth. And but I mentioned that border earlier that we created. So we've got two lower borders that wrap round the base of the terraces. So either side of the steps. That first one that we created here, the choice border, but then that wraps round to this sort of sunny border along the fence, which is currently got loads of climbing roses in it. And then there's an understudy, I'll call it, of things like dahlias, annuals in there. Earlier in the year, it tends to be tulips, hyacinths. There's some sweet William in there at the moment. Very much a kind of dotting what you can at the bottom in the summer, but the roses are the framework. And obviously roses are a big thing to me. Then at the lower garden, you've got that, the choice border, which is a mixed herbaceous border. There's all sorts of nice roses. There's heucheras, cottage garden-esque perennials really in the main. But at the very end, though, it's not. Where it meets the steps, I've improved the drainage in that to provide a lot of added grit, so there's a herb corner to that border. So while it's herbaceous for the main, it goes from herbaceous to herb. See what I did there?
Oh, yes.
We take the acious off. But then I've done it with a spin. So there is a herb garden at the ground cover. But what motivates me as a gardener is to get the most volume and impact, is rather than thinking too much that things are going to compete with one another and that plants will crowd one out. It's learning what combinations will not crowd each other out, so that you can have plants rivering through others freely. So in the herb corner, for example, we have alliums going through, because that's an easy win to puncture through all those low-growing ground cover herbs. And then equally there are irises in there, which the herbs, if you prune them correctly, if you make sure you allow the rhizome of the irises to be baked, they're in a heavily sun-induced position, they'll grow through that, and then the flowers sit much higher than where the herbs ever would be. But they're both enjoying those high grit, baked conditions that complement one another. And I do the same with a lot of plants in here. It's high volume for a reason, because things are feathered in with one another, and I like things flopping over paths and so forth. The lower border, we've got a lower border in here with all manner of sculptures. We've got peonies in there, we've got a jasmine in there, numerous roses, but then underneath summer flowering perennials that are more purple, I would say, purple colour scheme. And then in the upper gardens, we have a whole host of things. We've got standard roses in there, we've got usually in sort of shades of purple, pink in that side, and then more bright pinks the other. And at the back, totally different. We have a winter border that turns into a summer white border all the way along the back fence. And then correspondingly, we have a shady border, which the only bits of colour tend to be in that tend to be white and pink.
Beautiful.
Yeah, but lots of different things and lots of impact. And then there's the greenhouse, which is the working station. There's the fruit and the veg and so forth that gets grown around there. And we've got potted plants on the patio and plant theatres with little alpines in and so forth.
So what aspect is the garden, Chris?
Southwest, but then it's massively impacted by this beautiful huge oak tree. There are huge variations even within the garden created by that. So, for example, tulips in the upper gardens will flower 3 weeks after the ones in the lower, even if they're classed as the same type of tulip. If it's an early, they will be out in April, possibly, and in this case, this year, they were out in March, as we often got them early this year, didn't we? But they will be end of April into early May in the upper garden. And the moisture conditions and the level of water retention is totally different in both of them. And then right at the back, underneath the tree and the other landscape, because we have borrowed landscape behind, as you can imagine, that saps a lot of the moisture out of the soil. So while it's shadier, unfortunately, it can, in high temperature months of the year, dry out very easily. So there's a lot of education to this garden. It's not plain sailing.
No.
But the patio here is very sunny, but then the other side over to the as the aptly named shady border, that's a lot more moisture retentive over there.
Most people who know you, like you just mentioned, you love roses.
Yes.
So I've got three.
Does
I've got
he?
three roses. I've got one. I think is a
That's
rambling
appalling. Can
rose.
I just say that's appalling to only have three?
Three. One's a rambling rose, and I think it is, and that's way up high in my silver birch tree. One's a pink climber, which is way up on the side of my house, but the actual flowers are probably 20 foot up. And I've got one orange one I planted last year. And that's it. I don't know any of the names, but they're lovely. Mark, I, and Kim, we were at Hampton Court
Hampton
last
Court.
week. Oh my God. And that little rose tent there, Mark, was just unbelievable, wasn't it? Just
Definitely.
the different ones. Oh, I couldn't stop sticking my nose in them, Chris.
Yeah, it is, and I am obsessed. I accept that, but there are lots. But it hasn't been to the detriment of having to rip out other perennials. I hope. I mean, I have run out of room near enough for them. There are, I have to confess, there are about 93 roses in this garden from Tannery. It's ridiculous. And people do increasingly ask, how on earth are you doing that without affecting the plant? But the answer to that question that I give is analyze the type. I've always liked them. But it was the first plant genus that I would say, in not a creepy way, became romantically attracted to, because they are romantic plants. Don't say that in any weird, freaky way whatsoever.
No.
Nothing of the sort. But they have that symbolism. And I've even propagated, I've even gone to the length, and it's here, and I'll show you on the live. I've propagated and certified a rose that's in my nan's name, who's no longer with us. But that's the one. That's Rosa Beryl Fern. That was grown from one seed, and it's certified, as in I have paid for it to be certified as a rose. That's the level of obsession that I get
Wow.
to. But because they are, and I really should be more heavily involved in rose circles, really. Trained as well how to prune them from Michael Marriott, who used to be the head rosarian at David Austin. I mean, I'd love, chomping at the bit. An ideal thing would be to work for a rose company. But the reason why I can fit so many in is because I consider what time of year they're flowering and whether it's a wild one and a species one. And then I also consider, as with anything, is what colour combination, what other perennials will suit it, both for plant health and look at plant height and try and upstage them. So we've got, for example, here, we've got a lovely orange one, which is Lady of Shalott. It's a David Austin rose. But I bought it. I know it's more expensive to buy them, but I bought that as a standard tree rose. It sits underneath another one that's orange called Westland that was actually from the Rose Press Garden. They did that one. But then underneath, it's allowed all manner of new plants that just wouldn't be able to go in there if I'd have not gone up into the air. And that's how I think about why there's so many, because I've been able to sneak another rose in at ground level as a result of bringing that one up. And if you multiply that over enormous time, that's why I've got so many. Other times, it's just being not so fearful of the pruning regime in January. If you hack it back and you want something to remain small so you can fit other things in, then that's how I've treated it. And I probably would have ended up with half as many roses in the garden if I wasn't so bullish about things. Or, as I say, my approach to gardening in general is to make sure I can try and find things that river through others things. I love, look at this at the moment. Gosh, isn't this a lovely plant? This is a Cephalaria gigantea. And, it's a real tall, stocky plant. But in front of it, I've managed to sneak in a pale Nepeta called Giovanni that's bumping off that. And that choice of those plants is only because I've deliberately thought, right, well, I've got all this kind of carpet that was already here by this point, but I thought in my head, I'd love that to just jump out. And it's just done that. It's done as a visualize. If I planted that separately, I'd have no room to put that separately. No. It's got to be in amongst. And that's what I've been doing with the roses. It's no different. I've got some spring flowering roses that are in the location of a summer flowering one, for example. The rootstock is right next door to one another. So visually, they look like they're in the same place. But that's how I've. It's learning really, and it's social engineering and how to do it really. Yes, there's a lot of trial and error, but I've been fairly bullish about it, really. And I am obsessed with the rose. I can't deny that.
Why not? Something good to be obsessed about, isn't it? They're beautiful.
It is. They are lovely.
So
But the garden as a whole, though, is very. If I swizzle the camera around for a minute while I continue talking, you know, they'll get a better view than with my mug in front of it. It is still very herbaceously driven. You know, if I swizzle round, there are lots of plants in here that I hope, provide a statement or provide a kind of structural interest. And then on top of that, then there's the obelisks and there's the plant supports, and often they're doubling up as two different things in here. And then, you know, along the steps as you walk up, there's this blue globe, which the fennel comes up through. I've been trying to be intelligent and artistic with that. And then moving on into more recent times with the garden, that's just an old £5 Wilko rose, would you believe that? It's called Timeless Cream. But more recently in my gardening style, I've sought to become more intelligent with the use of plants as supporting others. So not only, I remarked on a live recently, this is Hesperus or Sweet Rocket. Rather than cutting all of that back to promote more flowering, I've left that in because I find that quite an attractive. I mean, it looks a little bit mare's tail-like, so it could freak the old gardener out. It's too high to be mare's tail. But what that's doing, this is where my brain works. I've thought, right, well, I can't just rely on buying a great metal plant support like this lovely leaf, which is supporting the clematis. That's Prince Charles there. I'm thinking, why not let a plant support that clematis as well? Oh, I've got this Hesperus. And lo and behold, the clematis is starting to grow into that. And we've got a perennial sweet pea here that's doing just that. It's lacing over. And if it wasn't for that Hesperus and the rose, that would just flop. So, and you've got different textural elements to that. So that's how that's where the garden's at the moment now. It's kind of editing it and it's making it, it's being playful with it. You know, there's a view towards a phlox and another rose, and then we've got Shasta daisies that are all, when they're all out, they'll grow through the fennel, which is looking great with all the raindrops on. And then this is the yellow border, which only really gets going late summer, really, sort of this month onwards. And then you go up the steps and you've got all manner of things, you know, roses galore, but also other climbers, and then totally different. You've got a woodland walk with two chairs at the end and an acer and Photinia, even a car park shrub makes an existence there. Yeah. Because if used correctly, it bumps off the acer. And then behind you've got a copper beech hedge and a young silver birch tree, which has quite boggy ground in front of there. So I grow things like in little fritillaries in the spring, followed by white daffodils and thalia, and then I have the Primula japonica in there as well. So plenty of things. Fantastic. I've loved all of this garden. I've liked the way that it's broadened somebody's horizons beyond that they could have ever imagined. So I'm happy with it as best as it can be. And there's plenty to do, and there's plenty of, as we all have, failures and plenty of unkempt bits and things that we've pruned incorrectly and whatnot. So that all comes with the forte.
But what I don't see is any edibles at all.
Well, that comes to here. So there is. So if I just move on here, so we've got previous years I have admittedly had edibles. Bear with. Oh gosh, I've got my head. Oh, I'll keep talking now, and I'll just swizzle it round. I'm struggling with the oh, there we go. So we've got greenhouse there where we started. So we've got in front of the greenhouse we have an obelisk here which has got sweet peas in at the back, but they're all grown in Hessian bags this year. I've alternated with that. We've got tomatoes in there, which is looking all right. That's a great big one in there. Need the side shoots to be taken out. We've got herbs in the pots on the plant theatre, which are then repeated near the steps as the herb corner that I mentioned earlier. We've got this is a large triangle planter, which has got a tayberry on the left, which has been harvested, a native tayberry, thornless tayberry, and then we've got gooseberry to the right. I've got tomato planter here, which needs staking a little bit actually, but they're coming on and just about to flower. And then in the side of the greenhouse, I can't go around because the reception might get affected, but I grow peas and French beans in containers, large linear containers. In previous years, I've grown more. Admittedly, this year I've not been well. I suppose because of the employment situation that I've been in, even when employed. I've taken a measured view on edibles, and we also do have a fortnightly veg collection box. That's a lot of it's locally sourced or whatever. So I try and only grow what I can't get from those scenarios. But what I do try and do in my learning experience is also companion planting. So I do a lot of dotting in a beetroot, for example, dotting in an ornamental, albeit we will harvest it, a cut and come again lettuce in amongst the herbaceous, for example. I've previously grown onions and shallots from sets. I did that really successfully. I've taken a break from that this year, and we've previously grown potatoes, but it's all been in grow bags, containers, and it tends to be around that station that we had. So this year, if anything, I've probably grown about 50% less edibles than previous, but that's because of the circumstances. Earlier years, I've chosen to grow more than that. And I also grow a lot of winter salad crops. If anything, this year I feel that the amount of yield that I will not only propagate but also harvest will probably increase with my winter veg stock, just because of the amount I just didn't get around to doing earlier in the year. But I have lots of things like mustard and tuna, bless you. Nasturtiums I grow edibly as well. I didn't show you those, but I've got all those. And I do like the edibles. And I think that's where the work context will help me enormously, continually going forward. I mean, again, at Easton, I grew edibles. I learned how to grow those. And I've grown courgettes previously as well. And this year, as well, I've got all of the heirloom seed from She Grows Veg this year. And I'm growing Hanging Prince tomato, which is a storage tomato that you grow like a grape on the vine. So you sun dry it effectively, and you sow that later. It's been sown now, but you sow it June, typically for harvesting, probably even October. You harvest it as the cluster, the bunch. So that'll be interesting. And like you, growing things like the hyacinth beet, but I think I'm not going to necessarily grow it for eating. I will grow it for the colour of it going up the obelisk, and I've got it in amongst the bed of what would almost be otherwise purple flowers. So it's a complementary statement edible there.
It's not doing much, to be honest, Chris. My hyacinth bean isn't. Yeah, I'll show you. Have a quick show you. So the rest of them, I've got several different beans. Let me spin around. So there's.
But you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Jamie. The yields of edibles.
See that one is doing amazing. Yeah. But then I've come over. There's another one here. I've decided this year just to have different beans dotted around in different obelisks. There's one over there.
That looks fantastic. And runner beans is another thing that I've not grown this year, but previous years I've grown runner beans, and really enjoyed them.
That's the hyacinth.
Right. Okay. Is it the temperature that's creating that? I mean, it's still actually it's looking quite dense though, lower down.
Yeah, but it's not shooting. It's not growing up at all. They're in the same time as that. I know that's just a normal standard runner bean. It's going to be a lot more vigorous, but it's just not doing.
Yeah, they look better than our runner beans at work.
They look terrific, yours. And I enjoy. And I do you know what, Jamie? I think your question to ask me about edibles is a timely one, because going to work and I mean, Mark's done a lot more fettling with the edibles than I have at work. But walking into that veg garden, I think I've missed the trick. I'm growing to understand the kind of diversity of what you can grow. And if anything, if somebody was to say, how would you want to evolve this garden differently into the future? I don't want this garden to ever look exactly the same. I want to keep evolving it. So edibles is definitely somewhere where I would want to move out of. I mean, I've hinted on companion planting, but I would like to move away from being so rigid as, you know, edibles go in front of the greenhouse. And that's why I've started putting in complementary planting. But this year, of course, I've moved things that often. I give the impression it's unreliable what I do. Not at all. I'm fiercely loyal with things when I get in the right place. I've just had a situation in a few unfortunate places on and on, this year in particular. But when I'm settled with the garden, particularly, that I want to keep evolving it, and if I have the routine time, I want to be out there as much as you are. I'm definitely more flower dominated, there's no question with that. But where I always say, and I've said this more to people recently, is that I will grow things I don't like. I will grow things that I have not been used to or am apprehensive of growing, or that others are growing, as an educational motive to keep on top of things and to keep nourishing that gardening spirit. So heaven forbid I'll even grow begonias, for instance. And actually I've come to like some begonias as a result of starting to understand how that plant genus operates and actually be aware of what their leaf colour looks like, and that they're not all horrible formal bedding begonias. And same with edibles, that there are some curious, you know, this whole move into heirloom of veg has taught me that there's some very curious lost varieties of things that is exciting, that's nostalgic, that's emotive. And even if I don't, I mean, I had a luxury of a tasting experience the other day. I posted about it at a local farm shop. I don't like aubergines. And I had this aubergine disc that I thought, oh gosh, here we go, I'm giving this, and I'm going to have to be polite about it. And it was wonderful.
Yeah.
It totally dispelled that theory of, oh gosh, aubergines being cooked badly or being covered in salt with unimaginative flavouring. And it totally dispelled that kind of mushiness, that texture that put me on. That to me then translates into a willingness to consider growing it. That's the difference. So I'm quite motivated by edibles, really. I used to think, oh, I'll leave that to another work context to do that, or have a few token things. But I think with people's guidance, those in the know on that, yes, you included, will help with that.
There's lots of talk nowadays about interplanting, isn't there? Just, you know, having a bright lights charge popped in the middle of a bed.
Yes.
You know, etc. Et There's so much of it.
If you were to combine that, though, let's say you did have a rainbow card and it was that idiosyncratic red colour one. The first thing that springs to mind is that you've got plants that then taint red in the summer to autumn. So if it were in a herbaceous border, you had a geranium that goes red, hardy geranium that is, that goes red as it ages, that bumps off the chard. You've got ornamental rhubarb or real rhubarb that obviously goes that shade. You've got lots of things that you can combine, some of which might be edible, some of which would be ornamental. You've got peonies that go red in the autumn that might bump off that. You've got all manner of, let alone trees and shrubs that do it. So I think there is a great bit of potential. I mean, here I've got some amaranthus, granted, not necessarily always an edible, but I had the luxury of going into a greenhouse at the hotel I stayed at, and I say greenhouse, I mean proper commercial glasshouse size greenhouse, the hotel I stayed at on holiday recently, and amaranthus was put on the plate for Christmas in Guernsey as a decorative element to the plate to help dress the Christmas dinner. So it was still being used in that kind of secondary effect, really, for culinary use. But look at that colour shade. I mean, so many things can bump off that. And then that triggers the ability, same with beetroot, for example, and the veining and the leaves off that. We've got sorrel in the garden at work. We often plant the red vein one, but there's other varieties available. Using that colour as a foil to then put bright colours in front of it then makes those colours pop. I mean, I do that with flowers. Why can't we do that with edibles? Well, we are doing that, is what you're saying. I'm inclined to agree with you. We're increasingly doing that.
My self-seeded amaranthus from last year.
Fabulous.
Look at that. 3. There's one there, and a little tiny one there.
Brilliant.
Absolutely amazing.
I mean, this one is actually one of those. It's not the drooping one. This is a sheep. This is an heirloom one. This is called Molten Fire, and it's the stocky amaranthus that stays upright, and then it goes bright red like lava at the top. These were sown late. I find that there's no point sowing amaranthus before May or June because they just will not take off, in my opinion. So I've sown these in June, which is why they are smaller. They're ready to be potted on.
And I'm just going to quickly show you this again because Joe will tell me about it. That's just week by week by week. That is just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I didn't. That's all self-seeded from last year. It's just ridiculous.
Now, is that Facelia or is it borage? I can't.
That's borage. It's borage.
Yeah. At least I got one of the answers because I mean the borage just loves it. I mean it's great. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant pollinator. Again, can be used in salads. You know, it's an edible, but it's all hideous stuff we're getting there. Well, I personally am in the light camp. I've also grown white borage as well previously, and it's used a lot. Can be used in salads. Good with tomatoes as a companion plant. I like it.
I love it.
It's all looking very well, Jamie.
Not doing too bad.
Yes, she's right about that. You won't ever get rid of it.
I don't mind.
That's right.
I don't mind. I can have that bed every year. That's quite nice to look at. It don't worry me.
Yeah, I like it. I thought it was Facelia at first, which incidentally I like growing that because that's another thing. It's broadening horizons of just thinking of what's a nice plant and what isn't, and what is edible and what isn't, and what combines with one another and what isn't. It's also starting to then trickle down into understanding the properties of the soil, and perhaps that's where the RHS talking about earlier was really helpful to me in understanding the properties of soil biology, pest and disease control, we'll say, and prevention rather than eradication, and learning as well how to garden organically. I'm fully organic gardener, have been for a long time now. Well, I say a long time in the small window of gardening that I've been gardening. Yeah. But what it's also said for is using plants that help with soil biology. So I don't like lupins personally. I'm on record as saying that I find them very ugly, alien-looking flowers. But I certainly grow them because of the nitrogen improvements that they generate for the soil. Facelia is another one that is a natural green manure that it's just an easy win. If it saves me the legwork, no matter how much love that I have for Team Purple, other brands are available, soil improvement products, I still take the view that it would be lazy of me educationally to not grow things that help the soil naturally before I even have to lift a spade to put compost or mulch into the ground to do that. Yeah. Because I'm not a no-dig gardener, and I'm happy to be able to say that. I explain that I do no-dig. I've previously done that in my previous work capacities, and there are areas of our garden that I've chosen not to dig. So I do a balanced approach, but I would still say that my natural inclination is to still dig the borders most of the time. But I still take a view that I find ways to lessen the amount at which I have to do that through learning what to grow in the borders to help self-sustain that and not sort of over-incorporate and over-affect the structure. So it's been good. I find this is so rewarding. And that's where it's different to kind of, I did have a lot of rewarding things in the planning sector, but there was an element of, here we go again, here's another housing and traffic estate that I'm putting an application in for, and here's Mr. and Mrs. Miggins turning up again to object to it. And also the whole issue that you don't get in gardening, which is what you personally believe in, doesn't necessarily always marry up with what you professionally believe in. So you might personally think, oh, gosh, I'm not keen on the lack of trees in this development, but professionally, that you know that lawfully, you know that they're not doing a foot wrong, that they are planting trees, they're planting enough. Or you might professionally think, oh, there's a highways assessment gone in with this work that you're submitting. But personally, you think, oh, I'm a bit worried about the traffic because I live locally and I know how bad that junction is. You have none of that tussle in your head that you're kind of mediating, and that's quite refreshing. So you don't get distracted down with the baggage like you do in a kind of professional industry like that sometimes. You run with it.
Sounds good. Chris, it's 9:10.
Is it really?
Yeah.
My goodness. That's my bedtime.
I could keep talking to you for hours and hours.
Oh,
I'm sure
we'll just have the
everybody else could. Oh yeah, definitely. Why not?
Thank you. Thank you to the loyal crowd that has stayed on. I hope they've put the kettle on.
We'll have you back in 23 episodes because it was 23 episodes since we last had you.
Okay,
So,
right.
Episode 69.
Well, that'll get us back into the winter again, won't it?
Oh, yeah. To be honest, it's poured it down tonight anyway. I think it did last time. Oh, don't stop! It's just getting good. Clinton's wanting an all-nightathon thing. We'll have to do an all-night podcast episode for Green Fingers or something. That'll be a charitable. You know, like when they do on Comic Relief and Children in Need, when they get somebody well known to sort of ride a bike all night.
That would be good, wouldn't it? Do a 24-hour live.
We'll have to be near a power source for that though, because otherwise my phone will die.
Exactly. You can keep those practical matters on. Yes. Well, I certainly will, but I have a terrible charger for this phone. Never mind. Somebody asked about tomatoes. What was the question about tomatoes from Peru? I've never been to Peru, just to say.
Yeah, someone said, how do you plant tomatoes? Never in Peru. I daren't touch them. How to plant them in Peru? Don't know.
Oh, in Peru, well, I'm not sure about the climatic conditions in Peru, but we were talking about the average temperatures actually as it happens. The tomatoes need a lot of heat to get going. I start them on a heated propagator, in my case, and I start them in March most of the time. I also learnt to sow seeds a lot later this year, so I started March even not before most of April with a lot of my seeds, much later than I used to do. And then they go into the greenhouse, and I try and reliably keep them at between 15 and 20 Celsius, really. Yeah. And the key with tomatoes for me is I take an approach of growing some of them in the greenhouse and some of them outside. I always have the comparison of both because of the blight issue, more likely to affect outside. But I hate this idea of losing the whole crop, which some people unfortunately did a lot. But by having that, making sure you resist putting them all in one basket, as it were. Yeah. And I also have some in pots as well, as opposed to the container grow bags and so forth. And I water at a rigid interval. I do not water at a discoordinated interval because that can then lead to the cracking of the fruit and slightly dysfunctional growth. But plant them deep. And I've seen there's comments to echo that. And I grow them in special planting pots with a water reservoir at the bottom, and they take the nutrients that they need. Obviously, I feed them as well, but that would, to me, be no different in Peru, other than the fact that I would say that probably the temperature reliability is higher there than we have. But I would. No, they won't. And also remembering to pinch out the side shoots, and also taking the first flush of flowers off to take the energy back down into that root and get the proper harvest going. I always try and be quite rigid with tomatoes rather than winging it with them in that way. You know, I don't try. As soon as I see the first lot of flowers on tomatoes, I abandon all of the garden jobs that I do. If I see it, I've got to do it, because I think the one thing I've learned with tomatoes and other things like that is an irregular approach to when you give them an attention is where you introduce risks. You know, there's no point watering erratically and then ignoring them. You've got to keep. I believe you've got to keep on a reasonable routine with them. They're not high maintenance at all. It's just you've got to have that aptitude.
Yeah. All mine, I had a bed outdoors last year, and they got blight quite late, I suppose, but within a week they were all gone. One whole bed. So this year, my outdoor tomatoes, I'm spread them around the whole plot. So if I see it on one, I can hopefully whip that out before it gets to any others.
Absolutely, and that sounds good. And then and just an alternating the variety as well.
Yeah.
That you choose each year. I find it. And we talked about companion plants. We talked about Borage. That's the classic tomato plant combination. But you've got types of basil that go very well with the tomatoes as a companion plant. Obviously, we know about the improvements of marigolds and nasturtiums and things like that. That's been well proven.
Jenny Wren in the Gardens put a good tip that you make a mare's tail brew with hot water, leave it for a few days, and then spray it on your tomatoes, and it adds a waxy protection for blight.
Oh, there's plenty of mare's tail at work then, Mark. Are you going to be setting me on to?
Yeah, I'll send everybody some concoction.
Yeah, this sounds dodgy. Chris's waxy glue to tail. So, there we go.
You'll have to make a big vat of it.
So before you go, Chris, we've got the lightning round, which you didn't get last time. So it's a new experience for you. So, tea or coffee? Flowers or vegetables?
I would still say flowers. Sorry, David.
Beach or forest?
Ooh. I'm going to say forest.
Ooh,
wow.
I said you'd go the other
I know I go to the Channel Islands often, but do you notice I look at the beach from a distance in a sort of natural bit at the edge?
Yeah. Go to emoji.
Green heart.
Yeah, good one. If you could only have one snack for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Snack?
Yeah.
It's just Kim's going to hate me for this. Custard. Is that a snack? It probably isn't a snack, is it?
No. Don't let you eat it straight out of a tin.
No.
You do that as well.
Absolutely. Yes, probably scones, I would say.
Oh, scones, not scones.
No.
Jam on top or below?
Oh. On your scone.
Yes. What do I do? No, I put cream on top because I'm not a huge lover of cream, so you can regulate the amount.
I don't think you'll choose either of these. Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Good boy.
Finish the sentence. My perfect day would be...
At a nursery, plant nursery, just to clarify.
As we found out today.
Well, exactly.
Sowing seeds or potting on?
Sowing seeds.
Oh.
Spring or summer?
I still feel summer, probably because of the rose influence.
Today's favourite plant?
I think that the little helianthemum, the rock rose that we purchased, was my favourite at British Garden Centres. Yeah, that's beautiful. A variety I'd not seen before.
Very nice. Especially for you, you've got to answer this one really quickly. David Austin or Peter?
David Austin. No, I have both, and all my Peter Beals roses are performing brilliantly. However, I still like my David Austin roses.
piece of bills just popped in to say that's the end of your deal.
I'm sure they did.
Oh,
Brilliant.
There you go.
Other brands
Thank you
are
very much.
available.
thanks ever so much, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No,
Enjoyed
it's been
that.
brilliant. I knew it was
That
going
was
to
a
be
real
fantastic.
question, that Rose one. That was deliberate, I feel. Yeah, I should have been diplomatic. Actually, they're all brilliant, aren't they?
Of course they are, definitely.
You made your choice.
Yeah. I know. I'm going to stick with it now. Oh dear. That's it.
God.
Dun,
Look
dun,
out.
Right.
Have a
I'll
nice
see you in
evening.
the
What's left
morning.
of it? Yes, absolutely. Right as rain.
Go and get some sleep so you're ready for work in the morning.
I might have a bit of cheese now, though.
Brilliant.
So I'll say a bit of cheese and a cheerio.
Cheerio.
Cheerio,
Thank you
Chris.
very much.
Thanks
Lovely
ever
chat
so
with you
much.
both.
Right, see you later.
No worries. Bye-bye. See you again soon. Cheerio.
Ta-da. Bye.
Hang on.
He's done it. He's done
Get
it.
out.
Oh, I knew that was going to be a good one. Absolutely love Chris to bits. Brilliant, isn't he?
Well, as you know, I do. I put up with him every day.
Yeah.
Definitely don't put up with him.
I'm sure there's no putting up. Have done, is there? I'm sure it's you have a fantastic work life now.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's
bet you do.
brill.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, really good.
Very
Really, really good.
inspiring.
Love that lot.
What do
I thought we were all going to go at once. No, we're going to sit and talk about you now for a minute. I just want to say, tomorrow, I don't know whether you've seen, I'm doing a little live with Julia Parker.
Oh yeah, she's ginger.
We're
Ginger growing.
we're gonna grow some ginger together. So 4:00 tomorrow afternoon. If anybody's about, you can. All you need is a bit of ginger and some compost in a pot, and you can grow your own ginger plants. Apparently,
4 o'clock.
Yeah, no.
People are at work.
Well,
we'll have to tune in from the garden at work.
Exactly. 4:00. Good time. Why did we say 4:00? What's happening tomorrow? I think I'm doing something.
Oh, there's some football match, isn't there?
Oh yeah,
so,
hold on. Look what I've just been greeted by. Hello. Look.
Aussies.
Hello. What are you running around like idiots for? Brambles. Brambles.
Broad beans.
Yeah. Right. Go away, horses. You're two in my face. Right. Fantastic, Mark. Love that.
Yeah, me too.
Really, really good. Have a lovely day.
All right, I'll see you next week, everybody.
See you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Jamie's live tomorrow.
Yeah. Grow some ginger. See you later.
Ginger. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to Through the Garden Gate.